I would be in charge of satellite communications. So basically, the way that people would have got their internet in order to make the things work is what we did. So, and that kind of required a lot of different single point of kind of connectivity out is the best way to put it.
So you're going from cop to cop to cop, just
Hmm.
sort of, are you maintaining equipment and just, making sure that the comms are as efficient and clear as they can be? What's your overall mission through the um I don't know if it's basically the same in both deployments or if it's a little bit different in the deployments, but maybe you could talk about that too. But what kinds of things are you doing?
So it'd be like the setup, the establishing. Sometimes it depended. Sometimes that we have to establish the link from like basically nothing. Um, I remember scrounging for equipment, going to like this really small cop, no, patrol base at Red V is where we went to. It was right off Route Red up in the Sangin Valley. And it was just me and my buddy Rob. We left with like maybe a day or two's notice. I remember scrounging for like Cisco switches and stuff in like Camp Leatherneck for things that worked. And then like we didn't even have all of our equipment. We got out there and have to set it up and wait for it to get there, which took however many days, you know. So showing up, new guy there. Nobody didn't know anybody. Either was arriving on a helicopter or on a convoy, however you got there, and then waiting for a few days for this random helicopter to drop your gear off, which you hoped was there. And
Hmm.
then once your stuff got there, you would set it up, program everything, kind of like establish your link. And then after all that kind of stuff was done, maintain it for a few days, and then basically just pass that off to whichever unit was there, and or if they were comfortable with it, then you would just go leave and go back to where your regiment was based out of. Most of the time we got stuck there though, is what happened, and just became a part of whichever unit that we were with.
Wow.
Um,
And so does your job involve then training the guys at the particular post where you are, training them how to use the
Mhm.
equipment, how to troubleshoot it and things?
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Just due to the nature of it, you know, you're one person that knew how to do that. So just for your like day-to-day routine, once you kind of like train these people, it doesn't matter what job they are. You know, I've had supply guys, I've had machine gunners, I've had you name it with me. My data guys, I'll train them to make my life easier. So that way it can kind of help me out, even if it's just watching the stack for a little bit. Um, that helps me out because then I can go get some sleep. Or when something breaks and it gets really bad, then come get me kind of thing, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Did your job involve sometimes guys at a cop saying, "We've got a problem, we can't figure it out, we need you to fly
Hmm.
out and do that"?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
it was basically like contact teams is what it was. We were kind of operating on the premise of being more reactive than anything, and
Yeah.
just trying to be the savior of everything. Because back then they didn't have what they have now, you know? They didn't have these nice like Starlink satellites and stuff that you can just connect to with an app. It was like, and you really didn't have a way to call out sometimes. So when you got out there, you better send the right person because if you didn't, I mean, you were just stuck with no way to contact anyone. Like your story, I had that same place that we got sent to. When we got out there, we waited on all the equipment to get set up, and I was actually with attached to 511 Tango and Sierra batteries at Patrol Base of Red V, and there was nothing there when we got there. It was like just some berms that were pushed out. We got convoyed from Fob Shook Vani over there in the middle of the night, showed up, and it was like a co-owned patrol base with the Georgians. So the Georgian liaison teams,
Yeah.
and we got there, and I remember getting there, and there was like uh, I went to the mess hall, what I thought was our mess hall. There's a bunch of people dressed in U.S. Army like PT gear, the gray ones, and
Mhm.
I'm walking in, and I'm like, these guys don't look. I've never seen like they don't look like I guess American, you know,
Yeah.
and they don't. I'm listening to them talk, and I'm like, I don't think that this is like this can't be. And then like turns out they were speaking like broken Russian because they were Georgian, and and they were just like handing me soup and bread, and then I was just like, what was this? Is the strangest experience I've ever had in my life. So I walk out, and then I was just trying to find a place to eat and a place to sleep, and I ended up getting a cot for the night just under the stars because they really didn't even care to put me anywhere because I wasn't really belonging to anyone. And I was just the guy that just had showed up to do the random thing that only like a few people knew about.
Wow.
However, is extremely important to what they did because once we got that link up and established, they did like a fire mission with the HIMARS that were out there, and we were in support of the British up in like the Kajaki area at the time,
Right.
and they actually had a fire mission that happened. So the only way to really do that full length of like events was like the link to where they could actually access their data stuff and be able to like, connect to the COC, et cetera, and pass all the traffic back and forth to them. So it was really like a connecting the dots of like my job is to do this, and this has a third order effect of supporting the British soldiers that were up there in the Kajaki Valley, and then kind of making sure that they stayed alive, essentially,
Right.
because the fire mission that we did with 511 directly supported them. So when I tell people all the time at my junior guys and everything, I'm like, I don't think you understand how important your job is in the entire like kill web.
Well, that's what I'm picking up. I mean, this is a really important job in that if someone it doesn't if someone's not doing this job, then it sounds like operations over time are just going to grind to a halt.
Or they'll go to like some, the most primitive form of everything happens a lot slower. So when you have all of your information flow the way that it should be, then everything moves smooth and efficient.
When did you join the Marine Corps?
It was so I delayed entry programmed my junior year of high school, and I was 16 at the time, which would have put me at about '08. I joined in July of 2009.
So when you joined the Corps, is it primarily the motivation of wanting to, respond to what happened several years before 9/11? Is it a mix of motivations, different set of motivations? As let's say you're on your way to you're on the bus on the way to boot camp and you're asking yourself, now, why did I do this? What's the answer to that question?
Yeah, it's well, I had a bunch of, friends. One of my really close friends, he ended up joining the Marine Corps Reserve as an infantryman. And so it was kind of like that, and like the guys who are upperclassmen to us joined, and I was like, wow. I mean, they came back, tattoos everywhere. Kind of like you could tell they've been traveled and stuff, different experience and everything. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. Like a part of it was like I want to do my part, and then there's like part of it that had like this cool like allure to it. And I actually had a appointment with an Army recruiter right before the Marine Corps recruiter, and he stood me up, and he didn't show up.
Mm,
And I was like, well, I guess I have no other choice then. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my option number two. And my
wow.
Marine Corps recruiter was extremely quick. He was like, nope, I'll be there tomorrow. And just that kind of thing set the stage for like, me wanting to continue. Like, yeah, I made this choice. It was good.
And then how did you get into the job that you ended up with? Is that something that you wanted and something you pursued, or just something that the Corps dropped on you after looking at your ASVAB?
It was a little bit of both because I wanted to join and do computer stuff. I always liked technology. So I said to him, I said, well, I want to work with computers. Well, I mean, he didn't stand me up completely on that idea because the OC field that I joined was command and control electrician. So I got what I wanted. I didn't know until I hit like my Marine combat training, my MCT battalion, where they tell you your MOS. I didn't know it until after boot camp, after MCT. And even when I got to like comm school, I still didn't really understand what I did.
You have two deployments to Afghanistan.
Mhm.
The first one, if I have it right, is 2011, 2012, and then you're back 2013, 2014. If you had just a minute to give an overview of that first tour, and then I'll ask you the same question for the second tour, what's the kind of the overview of this was the first tour and the overview, this was the second tour.
Overview of my first tour would have been it was just straight culture shock. It was very like different phase of everything. So we were very much like involved in like the kinetic part of the war, and it was, you know, patrolling, um, finding IEDs, doing that, etc. And
Oh,
then that turned into like, you were doing the hearts and minds thing also during that time, but it was more um, lively. And then my second deployment was kind of like a transition to turning everything over to the Afghan security forces and the Afghan army.
okay. And that first tour, is that the one when are you with NATO forces both tours?
Hmm.
You with NATO forces?
Uh, kind more, yeah, more NATO on my first one than my second one.
So are you going out on patrols with NATO forces, with a mix of US and British, or I don't know how that works. Are you just out on patrols with American forces, or is it a mix of with NATO?
It would be mostly American forces, but partnered patrols with the Afghans primarily.
Well, all right, so let's go through this then. So you're going out on patrols. Are you going out on patrols as, I'm assuming, you're in an infantry rifleman role at that, but are you also the comms guy? When you're going out on patrols on this first tour, what is your specific mission as part of the
It
team
was
on patrol?
It's kind of like a mix between the two. Um, Rifleman first kind of thing, and then you just happen to be the guy that has enough knowledge to make the radio work the way that it needs to. So it was kind of tied to the hip of like the company commander or whatever, unit leader you'd be with at the time. So, and that was kind of just to get out. On my first deployment, you kind of had to like, I kind of saw it as like earning trust of people because they wouldn't want, I don't want to take on the responsibility of sending like this new guy out with me when I've never worked with him. I don't know how he operates or anything. So it's kind of like you had to build the trust of these new, group of people that you just met for a while before you're even allowed to do anything like that.
And these patrols, are you going out mounted and then you dismount, or are they all in convoys, or how are these patrols working out?
Both. They had, um, depending on where we're at, there was a lot of them were mounted, that turned, sometimes to dismounted, but we would only really dismount in the event of like, something broke or, you find a suspected IED, etc. Then you would dismount, but primarily it was mostly the mounted patrols with a little bit of the foot patrols kind
Yeah.
of sprinkled in.
Are you going out on these patrols? Are you going out looking for the Taliban, or are these
Not
primarily presence patrols just to, show presence, or what's the mission of these patrols on the first tour?
It was really there's both kind of again because there was times where you'd have an op go on. And then obviously like an op would be more of an offensive type thing. But then there would be times where you're just doing it because it's built into the daily battle rhythm just to make sure that like, your presence is felt, it is there, to kind of prevent further things. You got to stay active in the area. If you don't stay active in the area, somebody's going to find you.
So just part of it then is sending a message to the Taliban, we're here, and don't try to
Hmm.
get a foothold here. How much of a problem were IEDs for you on that tour?
Oh, my first deployment. I actually think back on this quite a bit. Um, how I didn't like get blown up, I don't even know because we were down Route Red, primarily, which was a pretty dangerous place at the time. It basically linked the Sangin Valley to like Highway 1, which then led you to like the big base like Camp Leatherneck. So primary threat was IEDs. We had trucks with the mine rollers on them. Inside of the trucks, you had these different sweepers. If I remember right, they were called the Valens and the CMDs, different types of like dismounted sweepers. So they were a huge problem. I like if you didn't have one buried in the ground, it was either buried into a tree, buried into a wall, and then like a can with ball bearings and stuff packed into it as like a directional fragmenting charge. I mean, that was the primary threat. Like, and so much so as like we had these we called them blast panties issued to us. or a blast diaper was another way that people explain. It was
Yeah.
like this soft Kevlar material that went up along your groin and hooked to your belt, because people were having so many like proper way to put it is, but their boys would become affected because either their legs were getting blown off, or they're getting maimed in a way that wasn't meant to kill you, but it's just meant to like take you out of the fight. So IEDs were the main threat, a hundred times over again.
So it sounds, I mean, did you have many instances then where the ID hits and then there's a firefight that follows, or is it just ID blows and somebody gets blown up and that's it?
It would usually turn into a firefight
It would.
afterwards. Yeah, I mean, different, they over time they would become very complex. And that was something that struck me from like the first deployment to the second deployment. It's like they had the ability to learn um, different. They would develop their TTPs or SOPs off of ours. So they would learn and grow just as we would learn and grow. The only difference was they were permanent there. We were not. We were a rotational force, and they knew that.
Mhm.
So it would kind of exploit you in that way. It was always like the most dangerous. It was always like the 2 weeks after you got there, and then like 2 weeks to a month or so, right before you're about to go home. That was always the time where people took the most casualties.
Is that because mentally people are, they've started the process of going home already?
Yeah, a part of it, kind of like lulling into a sense of security, and
Yeah.
then just kind of not wanting to, probably burn out too after being there for, at the time 6 months to a year, depending on that's what our rotations were. And so yeah, you get burnt out, and sometimes it's just not your day. You're not paying attention. You just want to go home, and you relax a little bit too much, and then next thing you know, your trip home turns out to be a completely different one.
Wow. You kind of, indirectly addressed this question, but through the course of, I guess we can say both tours, but I think we're talking right now, especially about your first tour with everything you're experiencing, but you can think of it in terms of both tours. What was your assessment of the Taliban as an adversary? As a Marine, you've been through a lot of, really excellent training. You're well trained for your job, you're well trained for combat, your fellow Marines, same thing. What was your perspective on them after you'd experienced, how they operated?
Scary. It was, they were extremely good at what they did. Like I said, like the ability to learn different, units coming through there, changing up everything, how crafty and innovative they were. With, they were doing, we did all this stuff with this great technology and, the great training that's given to us. And then you get these people are literally used to doing more with less. And that's saying a lot because like us as Marines are used to doing more with less. But if you got somebody that can make like a roadside bomb out of like, two pieces of 2x4s and a small speaker wire led to, your charge, etc., like, and how crafty you can be is like they're very good at what they do. I went into it thinking like, oh, this is not going to be that bad. This is going to be easy. And then I came out of it being like, wow, that was a lot more tough than I thought it was going to be. And the spirit that they would fight with, and looking at the history of that country is just kind of ingrained into those people.
What was your perception of the Afghan soldiers who were with you?
They had, it was like some of them wanted to be there and they wanted to be there for their country and they were very patriotic in their cause. But there was a lot of corruption, um, that in just general, just like people that just didn't want to be there, but they were forced to be. And some of the people would get plucked from like other provinces to join the Afghan security forces, and then they would get popped into another province in the country, and they're like, but then they got cultural differences. Like, some of them are Pashtuns, some of them are Daris or Hazaras, and they would just not from ancient times just because of that. They wouldn't agree with each other. So it
Yeah.
was very difficult for them to integrate to be effective because of all the factors that they had against them. And it was much easier for them to get paid off by the Taliban and to go and do bad things to like their own people and to really make any progress for them, which was demoralizing because you would run into the people that wanted to be there. And these guys are like, they seen the Marines as like idols, they would cut their hair like us. Um, some of our interpreters would do that and they would like emulate us. Like they wanted to be a Marine because they liked what we stood for. And to see that extreme with the other extreme was just very difficult to work with sometimes. Really, what we needed was them to, as a people, to change their own country. And they wanted to, but there was so much bad that was involved in it, just bad, corrupt people that change would have never happened. Tribalism ruled that place. There's the governance factor was a nice idea to toy with. But would have that how would that have happened? Because they really believe on like their tribal elders a lot and they lean on their experiences over anything else. So you can
Right.
have the amount of government that you want inside of there, but it just will not take hold unless like the elders get on board. And that's who you always had to win over.
You said a few minutes ago that you got into some of the hearts and minds stuff, and you said that sometimes that got lively. Um, so I want to ask you about the kinds of hearts and minds thing you did, but what do you mean that sometimes the hearts and minds projects became lively?
Just because they had like the kids and you go shake hands with the elders and sit across from someone and the same kind of uh, day-to-day routine. And that day-to-day routine would be like, well, hey, I'm going to sit down and you talk to you. I would like you guys to work on this well. Okay, we're going to work on the well for the goodness and betterment of the community. Well, I actually want this in return, is what they say. And it's like we just built this well for you. We spent our entire like rotational time building this well for you, but like we just wanted you to give us things. That's it. I just wanted the easy way out. Um, so when you're like, well, no, I don't want to give you anything else. Like I'm here trying to build this for your community so you guys have clean drinking water. And while that's great, they wanted the money. They wanted it was interesting to see like the what's in it for me kind of mentality, which was like to see somebody that would pour their hearts into the situation just to have that kind of at the very end was like disheartening.
So you're saying so Marines or others who actually will build the well? Will that be civilian contractors who come in, or will that be Marines who are doing that?
Like a little bit of both. Like mostly like the Marines working with, whoever in the local area that would be willing to help kind of thing, just as the big project for, the deployment or whatnot. But yeah, not a lot of outside help.
And it's American money that's paying for it.
Hmm.
Right. So all right. So you guys build the well, and then the hope is that the elders of the village will say, "Oh wow, okay, the Americans are with us." So the Americans have just proven that they want to help us, and so we're going to work with them. We're going to collaborate with them. But it seems like you're saying the response was more, okay, now what are you going to give us? So we have the well, so now what's the next goodie we're going to get?
Yeah, I had a lot of experiences with that, like on my second deployment, because we were advisors, so we were seeing every single day the conversations that would take place, kind of just getting them to establish that day-to-day routine like you normally would in like the military, and taking care of their equipment, taking care of their people, sending things off for maintenance, getting it back, doing like the normal day-to-day operations, and then, just to see them say, like, you're like, did you send this radio off to go get fixed yet? And they're like, Inshallah, Inshallah, God willing, it'll take care of itself. And you're like, no, it won't happen like that. Like
Okay.
from a Western standpoint of things, like you have to do this, this, and this in order to get it done. That's the way that we think. But their
Mhm.
idea of time and space and how it works is just so
Right.
like it'll just work itself out. It's magical to see, but when you're like grow up in the Western world, it eats at you because you
Yeah.
want to have them get things done, you know?
So, let's come to the end of your second tour. You're there 2013, 2014. Um, you're on the plane on the way out, and we'll come back and I've got more questions about your time in Afghanistan, but just on this theme, you're on the plane on the way out now. If the thought goes through your head, so what was that all about? And you're thinking about these two tours that you've done really close together. Um, what was that all about? Why did I just spend 2 years of my life in Afghanistan? What was the point of all of that? What answer would you have given yourself?
I remember vividly, like shaking hands with the commander of the combat service support company that we were working with at the time, that fell under 215th Corps. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I hope we did enough to, you guys are going to be left, you know? There is no U.S. forces. There's only like 40 of us there at the time. And I hope that we, not just us, but like as a service, have did you enough justice because not everybody is bad. There was very good people there that really wanted to make a change. And I hope I did enough to help that.
Did you have any confidence, maybe 30%, 40%, 0%, 90% confidence that the Afghan National Army would be able to stand up and secure Afghanistan and bring about a somewhat stable government?
I think for a sense, for like a 30%, I think you were able to survive long enough. But eventually, the corruption would take over. The maintenance cycles that weren't going to be done would take effect on the equipment. Um, the logistics that the logistics supply lines and stuff that were just established would fall apart. And so I wasn't surprised to see, I can't remember when it was, 2018, I want to say, when I started seeing it on the news about the Taliban taking everything back over. I just wasn't because while there was a few good people that were there, um, ultimately they just waited for the bulk of us to leave. And then, they're very smart. So they would sit there and wait, kind of build up their forces, and then they would take over as they seem fit afterwards, which was kind of sad for the people that really wanted. I kept thinking about like all the interpreters that we would work with,
Yeah.
all of the young kids that were optimistic at the time, uh, that when you would look at them, they'd have such a sense of hope. And then just to know that like that, you have an your life is so difficult that you have ahead of you. And it's unfortunate that people have to go through that.
Now, it's both tours that you've got NATO forces around.
Mhm.
And is it British forces, Georgian forces?
Combination of, depending where we're at, Canadians, Danish, uh, British, uh, you name it. They're, depending on where you're at, uh, kind of interacted with a lot of them.
Um, which nationals did you interact with most?
It would have more than like it would have been Georgians I spent the most amount of time with.
What was your impression of them? Like, what's motivating them? What's going on with them?
And interesting people. I didn't know that they used to be a part of Soviet Russia, USSR.
Yeah.
So when they kind of broke apart from that, and then they were extremely tenacious in what they would do, haphazard at times. We actually often made the joke of we would operate on Georgian time
No.
because we we would have very hard time set for things, like be at the convoy brief at this time. We were very, as Marines, we were very methodical with that. You better be 15 minutes early or late kind of thing. And to see you show up 15 minutes early and then 15 minutes goes by. And then not like the Joe that's inside of the Georgians, not the lower ranking guy. It would be like the commander would be the one that was like never on time. And so you're like thinking to yourself, like, this is the people that I'm about to get into a truck with and I'm about to go in a convoy with. And like, they were just living a dream.
I've talked to a Marine who was involved in the training of the Georgians, and he said his sense was, and I don't know, again, you're a junior enlisted guy, so and you're busy, so I don't know, what you're picking up on or not. But he said his perception is that mostly what the Georgians were doing is wanting to get in good with the United States, and they thought, this is a way to win capital with the United States by helping out in Afghanistan, that they didn't particularly care
Mhm.
about what was going on in Afghanistan. Does that fit with your perceptions at all?
Yeah, I was told at the time, again, this is like years ago, but how I understood it was they were attempting to get into NATO. And that was kind of their way in to show that like, hey, I want protection. I'm gonna do this for you, not just for us, but for like NATO as a whole to be able to get in to NATO. And they suffered quite a bit. Like it wasn't rainbows and sunshine for them. Like they took a bad brunt out there. Um,
You mean in
so
firefights?
yeah, firefights, getting blown up in convoys, it's like they never put the GLTs or the Georgians in a good place. It was interesting to see how they would place people.
Mm.
Um, and they were very like unfortunate group of individuals. So when you would get attached to the GLT, you knew that like you knew where you were going to be at
In a tough spot.
in a tough spot. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Going back, I think talking primarily about that first deployment. And I'm not, prying for, you know, grim stories or anything. But I wonder if there are any events in that first deployment, thinking about the IEDs and the firefights, you know, kind of these memories that come back to you, in different ways, sort of the most persistent memories or the strongest memories or the most important memories that you have.
Uh, I've, it's easy to come back to. I I remember being out at that same place, patrol base of Redby. I was with my buddy Rob. Um, yeah, he was kind of like Batman and I was Robin. And we happened to be at this place. Some of the pictures that I sent you, actually were from that place where the guy's like laying in the cot reading the book,
Hmm.
inside of the tent. That was at PB of Redby. And, we get there and, again, there was nothing around us. We didn't know anybody attached to that, 511 Tango and Sierra batteries. And we get everything set up. And it's like, I remember we were sleeping one night and it was just kind of like, well, I hear like this, like whistling, like, and it got progressively louder and more real. And I was like, well, I woke up and I'm like, oh, well, this is happening. Like, this is a thing. And I wake up and I go run over to where Rob is. He's just across the tent from us. And I'm like, wake up. We gotta go. Like, this is not a thing. You need to get your stuff on. And I remember him waking up half asleep saying, what? And then we just threw our kit on and I opened the door to like the little, tent that we had at the time, and you heard like the snap of the rounds, and they were hitting sand, and you'd hear the rounds impacting, like the mortars, because we were taking mortars, is what it was, and
Wow.
then I'm like thinking in my head how I picture it in my head, and I replay it over and over again is kind of like a zigzag, like a serpentine kind of
Hmm.
thing, almost comical in a way of like how am I even like, why did I think that was a good idea to like zigzag through anything to get anywhere? It's not going to stop anything from happening, but in my mind, this is a great idea. We get to the FDC, the Fire Direction Center, and we were like, so what do we do? And the whole place is just a buzz, at the time, because there was Second Angle Co. was our adjacent unit at that place. And Angle Co. kind of had like the main hub of everything, and 11th Marines was just like uh, HIMARS fire support center kind of thing. And unfortunate to these people that were lobbing mortars at us was that we had this buttercup piece of technology that was there with us, which would reverse track the mortars. And
Oh,
so by the time that, everybody got to where they needed to go, people took their positions in the posts, started exchanging machine gun fire back and forth, small arms fire, found them, basically like tracked them, had air on station within not too long. I don't even know how long it was. Um, Took care of, the 2 to 3 man mortar team pretty effectively. Mortar stopped, everything kind of quieted down. There was Georgians there with us. After everything stopped, the Georgians were just going cyclic on their on their machine guns in whatever direction. It was every direction. Not sure if they actually saw anything. It felt really protected, but kind of like, all right, we're good here. We don't need no more. You
the
know,
Georgians were just going nuts, just shooting all around, all over the place.
just it was just mayhem. It was
Yeah.
controlled chaos, but very unfortunate for the folks that were lobbing mortars our way.
Mm,
We were situated right outside of like a small village, along a main MSR, Route Red. So with a presence like that of us being the only ones in the area, not surprised that we'd be a pretty big target.
yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty wild. That's like one of the more vivid ones. Um, and again, we were just sent out there to fix their radios kind of thing, their multi-channel equipment systems, and then you get caught up in something like that, to where
Okay.
you're not a rifleman. I'm not an infantryman by trade. I'm more of a combat service support role, but because of where I'm at, the time that I'm there, who I'm with, uh, becomes kinetic.
So are both tours basically the same, with the first one's a little more outside the wire, the second one
Hmm.
is more cop to cop kind of thing?
Yeah, because we had, my second one, we were more advising and assisting,
Mm,
that combat service support company. So didn't get to expose to nearly as much with them.
yeah.
One because of just with the job that we were doing, but more or less the time that we were there.
Yeah. Let me uh give you a scenario here. So let's say that, your commander wants to put you in front of 30, 40 E3s and E4s, and he's given you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to tell them the most important things you learned from your tours in Afghanistan. And it could be, here's what I learned as a human being, here's what I learned as a Marine. So he gives you freedom to pick whatever
Yeah.
you want to talk about, what you learned from your tours in Afghanistan. But I know I'm just dropping this on you now and you don't have any time to prepare, but what do you think the first things that come to your mind that you'd tell these young Marines?
To one, don't, and I've said this before, to others, one, don't be in a position to where you think that the war will not come find you. It will absolutely come find you, and you will need to be ready to go do what you need to do. And I see that play out in a lot of conversations, as times go on, and these kids think that like it's not going to affect them because of their job, kind of thing. It'll flip. My whole world spun on its head in the matter of, I don't know, a year's time. And so make sure that you prepare the way you need to. Always be ready. And that saying when they say like when the nation is least ready, like we need to be ready. Like that's extremely true.
Mm,
That'd probably be number one. Um,
mm,
I mean, number two is just like in the absence of everything else, take care of your boys and gals, your soldiers, your airmen, troops. Those are the ones that fight that war. So you need to make sure that like you're there to support them in every way you can. Um, and then three is like kind of more important too, is like taking care of your family. And as me being young and married, I didn't put as much emphasis on that as I should have. Had I not allowed other people's to influence my ideas, and just been confident in what we had, lean on my relationships back home, stay in contact with them, because when I needed them the most, those were the people to be there to support me.
I hear you. When a minute ago you said, your world got turned on its head in a year, is that because you assumed, well, I'm a communications guy, so I'm not going to get in any firefights and I wouldn't get blown up by an IED. Is that what you
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah, I was comfy. Um, I got to my unit uh early 2010. Uh, I had some friends, played on the softball team. I had
Mm,
a good thing going for me. And it was just work and then weekends, work and weekends. And I was in the air wing at the time, at a comm squadron. And I met my wife at the time. Well, now my wife, girlfriend at the time, through friends of ours. I had everything that I had wanted, and I was so comfy with where I was at. I get sent on a 6 month TAD to 29 Palms, then come back. My wedding's all planned out. Uh, and next thing you know, I go to my shop, and my platoon sergeant at the time is Sergeant Goujon was his name. Um, and I think about him as like this massive figure in my head, but really he's just the same sergeant as like every other sergeant.
mm,
He was a big guy in my head at the time.
yeah.
He goes, you're going to a victor unit. And I was like, what's that mean? He's like, you're going to you're gonna go deploy to Afghanistan or Iraq. He's like, this is it. Like you're gonna die. This is his exact words. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm like, this is too much. I'm like, I had just came back. I'm now thrust into this. Um, I'm going to Camp Lejeune, which is like the mecca for like actual Marine Corps things. And I'm like, this is where like NCOs are NCOs. This is where like, FMF units are going to deploy overseas. These are like the real deal. And I was nervous because I was kind of living in my own bubble of
Mm,
safety. And that changed, like I said, quick because I had to adapt to that and I had to really come to terms with my reality of trying to be newlywed, trying to be go deploy overseas, be away a lot on the workup, on the preparation of deployment, and then the act of actually deploying. It was a lot. It was a lot to go through in a year's time.
How did the events of August 2021 strike you? And as I asked that question, I mean, you were active duty at that time, so
Hmm.
you're showing up to work in uniform. You've got young Marines there that you're working with. How did the events of August 2021 strike you?
I remember when it happened and not being able to look away from the TV. I was glued to a television for like a week straight. Every time I'd go to work, I'd come home, I would just turn on the news. And I was just watching it over and over. It was almost like you were watching like a bad car accident unfold in like slower time. It was like these people are put in a really bad spot. Um, this is we kind of worked with these guys a lot in the past. I kind of seen this coming. Um, I hope that for the safety of everyone that like this all works out and cooler heads prevail. And it didn't. And we actually had the along Highway 24 here in town, Freedom Highway is what it's called. It's like the main drag to kind of go up and down this part of Camp Lejeune, Jacksonville area, and
Mm,
they had the service members that were killed, the 13 service members, few Navy corpsmen, etc., and some Marines. They had their pictures out there and everything, and they made a huge deal out of it here. One because the MEU was from here. Two because a lot of the Marines were kind of hodgepodgely put together and attached to the MEU over here. So there's a lot of connections and ties to this area. So watching it unfold, frustrating, um, every emotion. I was just drained by like the end of the days. And I'd be going to work, and obviously that like trumps every other conversation that you're having with people. So, and a lot of us at the time had been over there. So whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan. So it was interesting to see like the young ones, the young Marines, junior enlisted and stuff, young NCOs being looking up at you to like for your direction and guidance and like Also, we didn't know what was going to happen at the time. You know, that might have just sparked something different. So what
Mm,
do we do to prepare? You know, so it was, I mean, it was just a lot. And I remember taking my kids over there to see the like the memorial that they had put on the side of the highway and stuff. And they're, you know, it was tough. Come to find out, um, years later, probably 2 or 3 years later, I, as I'm like meeting back up with some of my friends, etc., from the area, guys I were with in other units, ended up being tangled up in that. Um, I was it. I served as a combat instructor from 2015 to 18. I, a handful of the guys that I was in those companies with in Kilo Company and Fox Company, MCT Battalion, ended up getting, they were over there. Whether it was LAR crewmen, whether it was infantrymen, straight leg. Um, the photo of the guy pulling the baby over the fence,
mm,
the iconic photo of that time, was actually a guy that I know. And I said, wow, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that it's this person that I knew, you know, because thinking back to how that person was, not going to say his name or anything, but you know, he was like that was just who he was. And to see it unfold like that, it's a very small world feeling to have everything come full
mm,
circle like that. And also to think back on like how you served with a group of like, you know, so walk amongst giants kind of thing. You didn't notice it now at the time when you were in, but those, when asked to do those extraordinary things that people always talk about that make the news, um, I'm not surprised that it was these people.